right, we're here on December 28th, 2012 with Lawrence Litz. First, please say your name and spell it.
L-A-W, Lawrence Litz, L-A-W-R-E-N-C-E-L-I-T-Z.
So what was it like working in the war on the Manhattan Project?
It was very, very exciting, and I felt that I was doing something worthwhile.
You went to the University of Chicago. What did you study?
I majored in chemistry and minored in mathematics, and also did a lot of physics.
When did you graduate, and did you get married soon afterwards?
I graduated on June 12th, 1942, and got married the next day.
What did you do after you graduated?
I went to work in Florence, Alabama, in an ammonia plant, and the ammonia is used to make explosives for the war effort back then.
Did you go back to Chicago?
Yes, I wanted to look for another job, and they were interested in me because I already had some industrial experience. I left because we had shifted the lab from 12 men and 1 woman to 12 women and 1 man. Then the man was me. I was studying the effect of nuclear radiation on materials having to do with the nuclear reactors, which were being built in Hanford, Washington. And then I went to Los Alamos.
What did you do going from Chicago to Los Alamos? Was that a strange experience because of the geography?
Oh, very different, particularly because Los Alamos is at 7,000 feet elevation, and Chicago was at sea level. So I had to learn to breathe properly.
So what kind of work did you do at Los Alamos?
I worked on technology involving plutonium, and it was a high vacuum technique such that we could put the plutonium metal, the plutonium chloride as a salt, and reacted it with magnesium metal to make magnesium chloride, which then could be boiled off, and then were left with a little button of plutonium metal about 1/8 of an inch in diameter, and this was our first creation of the plutonium metal in the world. So we were the first ones to see it.
So you were the first person to see metallic plutonium?
Yes.
Who was the second person?
My wife. My wife was working in an adjacent lab, and I invited her into my lab to look through the telescope at the reactor in which we produced the plutonium metal.
And what is the crucible?
Well, the crucible is kind of a metal crucible, but it is actually cerium monosulfide, which allowed us to melt the plutonium without contaminating it. And so we had a high vacuum system, and I don't know whether you can see the this is the one of the technical pieces for a high vacuum system.
And so that's one of the pieces?
Yeah, used to create a high vacuum.
What is it made out of?
This is brass.
Okay. So
And the crucible is cerium monosulfide.
So as more plutonium was needed, did you have to find new methods?
Well, yes, because plutonium as a solid exists in 6 different crystalline phases between room temperature and its melting point about 800 degrees centigrade. And of course, if you have something that is changing crystal phase, it changes shape. And the problem, you can't make a bomb out of something which is changing temperature, which is changing shape as it got hotter. So we learned that we could alloy it with a small amount of gadolinium, and then that would stabilize a single phase, and then we could cast it in different forms.
Was that well known, or was that secret at the time?
It was not well known because plutonium was not known to exist even till we made it in our research lab.
So the gadolinium mixture, that was top secret.
Yes.
So what was the bomb design that you helped develop?
Well, in order to make the bomb, we had to make the plutonium metal in a sphere, and in order to get a sphere, we had to cast each half of the sphere, and then the sphere would be about 8 inches diameter, and we would put something in the middle of this 8-inch diameter sphere, which would release neutrons that would cause the plutonium to undergo fission and release very large amounts of energy.
So did you help cast the plutonium sphere?
Yes, and so this was all done in high vacuum to keep the things pure.
Was that dangerous work, or was it fairly safe?
Well, in a sense, it was dangerous because we were working with something that was radioactive.
Mm-hmm. So did you know that it was for a bomb?
Yes, definitely. We knew what we were about to do and realized that it was something that was important to the military.
When did you find out that the bomb had been dropped on Japan? Did you find out from the newspaper?
No, actually, we had correspondence from the people who actually dropped the bomb, because we had to be prepared to make more bombs as necessary.
How did you feel when you found out the bomb had been dropped?
Well, we thought that we were going to make the war come to an end, which we did, and that was a very happy feeling.
So why was the bomb important?
Well, because it was a simple way to stop the fighting.
And was that important for you personally?
It was certainly important personally, but also from the scientific point of view that it was a new technology.
Did you have any other relatives in the Army?
My brother was in the Army.
And would he have been involved in the invasion of Japan had it happened?
Yes, I'm sure that had the war not stopped, that he would have been in the invasion.
And you mentioned that Oppenheimer had spoken to you the day before, or the day the bomb was being dropped, or being shipped to Tinian. What do you remember what he said? On 9C?
If you want to go ahead and show it, we'll cut this part out.
It's on 9C.
Yeah. Yes, Oppenheimer actually spoke to us for about 2 hours on the day before the bomb was shipped to Tinian Island near Japan, where it was set to be launched, to be dropped on Hiroshima. And he stressed that hopefully it would end the war.
Great. After the war, what did you stay on with the Manhattan Project?
Only for about another month, and then I went to graduate school at Ohio State.
How did you react to working in the war?
Well, as a scientist, I was happy to do anything in which I had knowledge, and most of my science had to do with chemistry and water and different types of solutions. I had very little training in metallurgy, but the fact that I could build high vacuums meant that I was the right guy to take on this project.
How old were you?
I was only 22 years old then.
Were you one of the younger people?
Yes, definitely.
So how did you get to Los Alamos? Or did you know, when you went, did you know what was being done there?
Well, I actually didn't know. The secrecy was so high, we knew only that they were working on radioactive materials. I didn't even know where Los Alamos was. And the people, when we had to go, they just bought railroad tickets for myself and my wife, and we could take our little puppy with us on the Santa Fe Chief.
So did you end up then going to Lamy, New Mexico, which is the closest stop?
Right, the closest stop for the train was Lamy, New Mexico, and it's about 18 miles south of Santa Fe. And we got off the train at Lamy, and then we had to wait for the people to take us, and so we had to just sit and wait on the platform. My wife and I and our little puppy.
Was Lamy very big?
No. No, Lamy was small. It was sort of built around a train station. About half a block away there was a parking lot in which there were a few military vehicles. After he'd been sitting there at the train stop for about a half hour, one of the men got out and asked if I had been at the Met Lab in Chicago, because he recognized me. Then he asked me if I was going to the Hill. I didn't know, but said, I guess so. They drove us to the center of Santa Fe, and then we got into another car which took us to Los Alamos. When we got to Los Alamos, they said, you weren't supposed to bring your wife with you. But they should have known, since the people in Chicago had bought a ticket for her as well as for me. But since they weren't expecting a couple, they only had a small apartment available for us. But they managed to get us a couple of beds and several lamps so we could at least have a place to sleep that night.
So what was your early work at Los Alamos like?
Well, for about 2 months, I worked on the water boiler, a nuclear reactor surrounded with water, which would deflect neutrons back into the material. Then they transferred me over to the Met Lab.
So, as a young scientist, how did you feel about working at Los Alamos?
As a young scientist, I was really interested in doing anything which would take advantage of my skills.
What did your superiors think about your work there?
They thought I could do almost anything.
So what was a typical day like at Los Alamos?
Well, typically, we would start working in the lab at about 8 in the morning, take a break for lunch, and then Evelyn and I would break together and then go home to have lunch, and then we would come back to the laboratory and work until about 5.
Did you work every day, even on the weekends? If you don't remember, that's fine.
I know.
What was how do you remember working on the casting the plutonium for the third bomb?
A particular day that remains in my memory was the day that we cast the plutonium for the third bomb. Because we weren't sure that the Japanese would surrender even after the second bomb was dropped, we had to cast the hemispheres for the third. And because the time was short, we had to cast the 2 hemispheres at the same time, but it was dangerous to cast them in the same laboratory at the same time. So we set up 2 adjacent laboratories with high vacuum apparatus, and so we could cast 1 hemisphere in each one of the 2 labs.
How long did that take to cast?
About 24 hours, and we had to work straight through.
So what did you do when you didn't need to use the plutonium for a third bomb?
Well, after we found that we didn't need to use the third bomb, we decided to use the hemispheres for research. And we designed an array which took the neutrons that came out of the sphere back into the sphere and would keep the neutron radiation away from the scientist who was doing the work, the experiment. Now, one of the men who was working on the experiment accidentally bumped the array, exposing himself to the radiation, and died 2 weeks later from the radiation.
Do you remember, was that man's name Louis Slotin?
I don't recall.
Okay. Were you ever worried about being exposed to toxic materials?
Well, of course we were worried about it, but that was the job to be done. We always tried to be safe. I worked with rubber gloves in the dry box, but I also had to clean up the high vacuum system every 3 to 4 weeks. So by the end of the war, I ended up with what was termed at that time to be exposure to the maximum tolerable dose of radiation.
And how long does plutonium, how long is the half-life?
The plutonium half-life is 5,000 years, so it'll be around long after I am gone.
So what was life like in Los Alamos? Did you make a lot of friends?
Yes, we made a lot of very good friends. One of whom I remember was Feynman, who was one of our neighbors.
Do you have any funny stories about Feynman? Or do you remember any conversations you had with him?
Not in particular at this stage.
Okay. Did you keep in touch with any of the other scientists?
We were not allowed to correspond with other scientists at all. In late 1944, we got permission to visit our family in Chicago, and I was told that I was not allowed to say anything about what I was working on. And I knew that I was being followed by G-men to make sure I didn't say anything.
Who were G-men?
These were I guess engineers who took care of the secrecy information.
So how much longer was the information on the bomb classified for?
Well, it was partially declassified about 4 to 5 years after the bomb was dropped, but the fine details were not declassified until about 2005.
What can you tell me about J. Robert Oppenheimer?
He was a very positive, encouraging man and very caring about our work. He made sure that we had a complete understanding of the importance of what we were doing. That undoubtedly, it would kill many people, but this loss of life would end up in saving millions of lives.
So what did he tell you in the 2 hours on the day the bomb was dropped?
Well, he told us exactly where the bomb was going, to be in Japan, and that even though we were not pleased with the moral aspects of killing people, that we need to understand how many lives it would save.
Did you keep in touch with Oppenheimer after the war?
No, I didn't correspond with him after I left because much of my work which was with silane and fuel cells, were not of common interest to what he was doing.
What did you think about during the Cold War when he was accused of being a communist?
I was very disturbed when he was accused of being a communist. There was never any indication during the war that he was anything but an extremely loyal American citizen. And as a consequence of those hearings that they had, he was really destroyed emotionally. And anyone who knew him during the war had to be extremely disturbed.
So Oppenheimer was someone you admired then?
Definitely.
So what kind of work did you do after the war?
I went Oops, do I have some?
We have to fill you in.
Okay. Did you have any? Did you receive any awards after the war?
I was given an award as a pioneer in the semiconductor field.
Great. So are you proud of your work on the Manhattan Project?
Very definitely, yes.
Great. Do you have any other stories you'd like to share from your work on the Manhattan Project or your work as a scientist?
Well, I was a very diffuse scientist, meaning that I worked in many different projects and different technical areas, and I actually have 42 patents in the areas that I worked on.
Wow, that's terrific. What kinds of patents are they for? Semiconductors?
Some were semiconductors. I don't remember all the technical
That's
details.
great. So you really enjoyed working as a scientist.
I definitely did.
What did you enjoy the most?
I guess accomplishing things, you know, being able to solve problems.
Did you have a favorite project you worked on?
Not a particular one. I just enjoyed whatever I was doing.
Do you think your work on the Manhattan Project helped you after the war in terms of overcoming challenges in research and teaching you about many things?
Well, in the sense that, you know, working on any project helps you broaden your capabilities, and I think in that context it was important.
Was the Manhattan Project one of the most difficult projects you worked on?
I think it was, yes.
Why do you think that?
Just sort of hazily recollecting one versus the other.
Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
No, I think that's it.
Great, well you were terrific. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Right, it's a wrap.
Great.